Ministry of Energy and Resources. She joined Pile of Bones Toastmasters Club in May of last year and has taken on many roles so far, including VP of Education for the upcoming year. Today, she will be completing her final speech in Level 1 of the Visionary Communications Path. This speech is based on her master's research she completed while obtaining her MBA in the spring of 2017. She has asked the timer for lights at 5, 6, and 7 minutes. Please help me welcome Jenni to share her speech titled Barriers for Women in the Public Service. Thank you.
Over the years, extensive research has been conducted on the subject of women in senior leadership roles. Through this research, it is clear that the representation of women at the top of organizations is still lacking. Men are consistently 2 to 3 times more likely to hold one of the upper management positions amongst organizations. The objective for my research was to identify which barriers exist within the context of the Canadian public service, and to further understand how these impact women's careers and the organizations they work in. To share the results of my research with you today, I've broken it down into 3 sections: barriers, implications, and recommendations. In order to understand the barriers women face and their implications, the Government of Saskatchewan was used as an instrumental case site. Initial data collection was obtained through the Public Service Commission for the number of women in each different ministry, as well as the women in middle management and senior management. The initial trend analysis was used to select women in different ministries to do interviews. 2 were chosen that were above the average for the Government of Saskatchewan, and 1 was chosen that was below the average. Men and women were both included in the interviews at the Deputy Minister, Assistant Deputy Minister, and their direct reports level. Through the interviews, it was clear that barriers do exist for women in the Saskatchewan public service. One male participant noted, "I might be the luckiest person in the world, to be frank. If you happen to be white and a male, life's a lot easier for you than it is for anybody else." The theme findings are compiled across the 3 categories as outlined in the research framework: macro, organizational, and micro. And you can see those on your second slide there. Within the macro category, 2 themes emerged: gender stereotyping, which was broken down into occupational segregation and perceived leadership styles, and gender roles in the home. Occupational segregation is the stereotyping of certain positions or industries with either male or female. For an example, case workers are women and highway patrol officers are men. It can be seen in the data of looking at different ministries that there is that segregation going on in the province of Saskatchewan. There's a noticeably lower representation of women in senior management in the ministries like economy, which is now energy and resources, highways, government relations, where there's more traditional roles that are associated with masculinity. On the other hand, there's high representation of women in senior roles in ministries like health, education, and social services, where those types of work are more associated with the feminine qualities. Another theme throughout the interviews, both men and women participants says, was the difference in leadership styles. The interviewees discussed the differing styles and the disadvantage for women that they had seen either for themselves or with their coworkers. This is in alignment with research and the study after study that has affirmed that people associate women and men with different traits, and they link those traits that they perceive with men more with leadership. Another theme when taking a look at gender roles in the home, one participant shared that gender roles that have been in place for a long, long time make it more difficult for women than it is for men. Themes at the organizational level included exclusion from networks, lack of career guidance and opportunity for mentoring, lack of experience, and inhospitable work environments. Of the barriers identified at the organizational level, the exclusion from networks was amongst the most common. One participant reflected on her observations throughout her career, where she described the old boys club as a real barrier for women. It was clear throughout the interviews that mentoring and career guidance played a significant role in all of the participants' careers. That being said, the majority of them did not think of this as a barrier, but when one thing they were asked is how does this impact the government, one thing they talked about was the need to recruit more mentors. The formal program tends to have a lot of mentees and not a lot of mentors. When asked about barriers, very few of the participants referenced lack of experience as an obstacle they had faced or observed women facing. However, when asked about opportunities and recommendations, a work experience that gave people opportunities for stretch tasks and to really develop a skill set was found to be critically important. Mention of the culture of the organization as a barrier for women did appear as a theme across the interviews. One participant shared, "It was an environment where I experienced that kind of comment that wasn't ill meant, but they just didn't understand that you didn't talk about women like that in the workplace." In the literature, work-life conflict was categorized as a micro-level barrier, but through my interviews, I really saw work-life conflict and gender roles in the home across all three levels, and it impacted all of the different areas. Overall, work-life conflict was seen to be significant for women as they moved through their careers because of time taken off to have families, as well as increased time investment required from senior leaders. One participant shared an example he had seen within his network over the years. A couple of women who really wanted to advance to senior levels within government, they made a very conscious choice not to have children because they could not. They believed that having children would prohibit them from spending the time and the energy to advance their careers. While this was described as a personal choice that the women make, it's pretty easy to see that this could stem from the culture that the organization has had for many years, that senior leaders needed to spend a lot of that extra time in the office. When looking at implications, two themes emerged from the study: decreased job satisfaction and the lack of diversity on senior leadership teams. One participant shared that when she realized that she had hit her ceiling and that her vision for her future and her career wasn't going to be possible, it really had an impact on her satisfaction at work and her satisfaction in her life. At the organizational level, the lack of diversity was believed to cause missed opportunities for the public service. Not having that wide representation of people making decisions and being involved in decisions really had an impact on the decisions that were made because that balance wasn't there. 3 recommendations for practice emerged from the study. The first was that the government of Saskatchewan should maintain the formal mentorship program, but they should really focus on recruiting mentors and making sure that that's part of people's work planning process. Recommendation 2 is to increase women's access to cross-functional experience and for the government of Saskatchewan to make that a little bit more easy. A lot of the feedback that I got was there was opportunities for people to get different experience, but the amount of paperwork and the amount of work that needed to happen to make that actually go was too much, so lots of opportunities were missed. And my final recommendation was to introduce increased measurement or governance throughout the organization beyond the metric of how many women are in certain positions, but to focus on accountability through our work planning process for the mentoring and encouragement of women to apply for positions and for promotions.